Hi all, welcome and welcome back to my channel. Police in Arkansas held a new press conference on June 23rd to give an update on their investigation into the shooting that took place at the Mad Butcher grocery store in Fordyce, Arkansas, after a fourth victim has now succumbed to her injuries. They laid out a timeline of what they now believe took place that horrific morning and talked about the heroes who tried to save innocent and injured shoppers. They said Callie Weems, the mother of a precious 10-month-old baby girl and a nurse at the local hospital, was a hero trying to help an injured shopper in the store when she lost her life. Now, her baby girl will never truly understand how selfless and brave she was. And they said police bravely positioned themselves between the shoppers and the gunman to try to stop him from injuring more people. Before I play the new press conference for you, I want to share an interview with another man who was in the grocery store, who almost lost his life, but thankfully is alive today to tell his story.
Thanks for choosing THV 11 News at 5. I'm Faith Woodard.
And I'm Rolly Hoyt. Tonight, processing continues for many following last week's deadly shooting at a Fordyce grocery store.
We've seen many things come to light since Friday, and we want to make sure you're up to date on the latest developments. Let's start with the updated timeline. According to Arkansas State Police, a little after 11:30 a.m. last Friday, a suspect pulled up at the Mad Butcher grocery store. State police have identified the suspect as 44-year-old Travis Posey. They report the suspect first opened fire on people in the parking lot before entering the building and continuing to fire inside. We know some of the survivors took cover inside a freezer, but in all, 14 people were shot, plus the suspect, and 4 people lost their lives.
We're going to talk more about those victims in just a few minutes, but about 3 minutes after the shooting started, 6 law enforcement officers responded to the call, and they shot the suspect, ending the threat. Posey's from the small town of New Edinburgh outside Fordyce, but he's being held in Ouachita County in the jail there in Camden. It's about 30 miles from the crime scene. The shooting left 2 police officers or troopers with injuries, but they're recovering and expected to be okay. And according to Dallas County Sheriff Mike Knadel, Posey and his public defender waived his right to an arraignment today. We're still working to learn when he'll make his initial court appearance. For now, he faces 4 counts of capital murder. And since Friday, we've learned of many people who risked their lives in the firefight, some who don't even have a badge.
THV 11's Rebecca Brown joins us live in studio. Rebecca, you spoke today with a man who survived and is known for his selfless act of helping others during this difficult time.
Yeah, Faith and Rolly, I had the honor to sit down with Silas Compton, also known as Cy. He managed to escape gunfire and warn others of the active shooter at the Mad Butcher grocery store. His swift actions and his selfless actions to help others is what Compton tells me comes naturally, and he just wanted to protect his friends, neighbors, and loved ones. Not all heroes wear capes, but they often share 2 common qualities: boldness and bravery.
From the shotgun shells grazed me there and in my arm, and see my arm's all black and blue there.
Each bruise and each scar represents Silas Compton's survival after fighting for his life and helping others in Friday's deadly shooting at Mad Butcher grocery store in Fordyce.
And I see him down the aisle shooting at people, and the front windows are out of the Mad Butcher, some of them are all just shattered because he shot them and stuff, and people are screaming, and you know, it's a sad situation, I can tell. And so I go in there and I yell at him, and I can't say exactly what I said, but I told him to stop. And whenever I did, I guess he turned around towards me, and so I ducked and he shot.
Compton says fortunately he wasn't hit directly by a bullet, but he did suffer from shrapnel wounds. However, those injuries didn't keep him down as he managed to get up and warn others outside of the active shooter.
I'm glad I could have been there. You know, I'm very glad I was there and able to help out, you know, and I wish we could have kept more people from dying.
During this tragedy, Compton recalled only thinking about his wife who has cancer.
My wife was on the phone with me. And at one point, whenever I pass out, she's still on the phone with me for like 2 hours, and she don't know whether I'm dead or what.
Compton says he lived in Fordyce for more than a decade, a place he calls home, and never thought this would happen.
And it saddens me every time I see it, and it just angers me because it's not something that should be going on.
Compton credits his faith as the only reason he survived, and it's the only thing getting him through this difficult time.
I trust in the Lord. You know, in the natural, I don't see it. Maybe never. But I put my trust in Him, and He will take care of me.
According to Arkansas State Police, five of 8 shooting victims are still hurt, and one remains in the hospital in critical condition.
So many prayers are still needed for all those affected by this horrific shooting. If you have any to spare, I'm sure they'd be much appreciated. Thank you as always for watching. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel for more true crime stories and updates. Stay safe out there, and here is the press conference with the updated information.
Officers were on scene in less than 3 minutes. From the time the first shot was fired and the time the suspect was down was less than 5 minutes. The primary thing I want to do today is thank the 6 law enforcement officers who were on the scene during the shooting. All of them were either with the Fordyce Police Department or the Dallas County Sheriff's Office. One of the officers worked for both agencies. These men worked together to stop the man, who I'll refer to as the suspect, as I walk you through a summary of what occurred. These men responded to a call from civilians who were taking fire. These civilians were their friends and their neighbors. They all had active shooter training, and most of them had prior military experience. These officers used that experience in their years of public service to eliminate the threat quickly. We know the suspect arrived at the Mad Butcher armed with a 12-gauge shotgun and a pistol. The suspect also had a bandolier with dozens of extra shotgun rounds on his person. We believe most, if not all, of the rounds fired by the suspect were from the shotgun. We believe he immediately began engaging victims in the parking lot after exiting his truck and then proceeded into the store. Once inside, he was firing indiscriminately at both customers and employees. When law enforcement arrived on scene, the suspect exited the store and the officers redirected his attention towards them and immediately engaged in a firefight with law enforcement, where they were able to stop the threat. During the incident, we observed the very best and the very worst of humanity. As an example, instead of fleeing from the obvious danger, Callie Weems began using her training as a nurse to render aid to a gunshot victim, and unfortunately became a victim herself as a result of her selfless actions. The actions of the suspect were the most cowardly, pathetic actions imaginable, as he was literally preying on defenseless victims, the majority of which were female. Due to the quick response of law enforcement, they turned the hunter into the hunted. These officers range from a police officer who's not even yet attended basic law enforcement training to the Dallas County Sheriff Mike Nadel, who has almost 40 years of law enforcement experience. These officers literally and intentionally put themselves between the suspects and defenseless citizens. Their actions were nothing short of heroic. After the threat was neutralized, they immediately began rendering aid and coordinating medical attention and the evacuation of the injured. At this time, the suspect's motives are unclear, and that's obviously going to be a focus of our investigation. Right now, our priorities are twofold. The first being the successful prosecution of the suspect and making sure he's held accountable for his despicable actions. The second is to ensure the community of Fordyce and the citizens of Dallas County receive the support and prayers that they so desperately need. Please understand that there may be some information we cannot release at this time because we want to protect the integrity of the investigation. The Department of Public Safety Wellness Unit was immediately deployed to provide support and counseling services to the law enforcement personnel involved and to the family of the victims. We've had dozens of special agents from the state police and troopers from the Highway Patrol Division that have worked tirelessly in support of the Fordyce Police Department and the Dallas County Sheriff's Office. We've also received support from many other law enforcement agencies, to include our federal partners, that have offered any assistance needed. want to thank you to our media partners for your sensitive coverage of these events. We appreciate your patience and understanding as information trickles slowly in such a chaotic event. We ask that you continue to give the Fordyce community their appropriate space as they process these events. And with that, I'll take some questions. Yes, sir.
You're about with the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Do we know if the suspect had any previous criminal history at all?
I don't know specifically, but my understanding is his criminal history is very limited, if there's any at all.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I think in the press release yesterday, there's mention of a Stuttgart police officer.
There was we believe a Stuttgart police officer that arrived during the scene or during the events that did help render aid to officers and other victims at the scene.
And he was one of the officers that was shot.
Actually, no, he was not. There's going to be a press release that will update that information. I believe that during the chaos of this, the wrong information was released on the identity of the second officer that was injured, but it was not the Stuttgart police officer.
Don Rice with News 92.7 FM in Camden. It's rumored, it's not confirmed, that Sheriff Mike Knadel shot the shooter, and the shooter was transferred to Washita County Correctional Center. Is it because that Sheriff Knadel shot the suspect that it would be a conflict of interest, or to be more transparent to keep him in a different jail system, and the event that something happened that they would question what would happen to him versus putting him in neutral territory? Is that
right? Sheriff Knadel was engaged in the firefight with the suspect. However, I don't believe that led to the decision of him being transferred to the Washita County unit. I think there was just some separation needed there. There were so many people involved in local law enforcement that we just needed to have a little bit of separation in space. You have to understand, this is particularly difficult for this law enforcement community, for the entire community. But kind of in contrast to, some active shooter situations or mass shootings that we've seen around the country that may occur in, say, a large metropolitan area. The thing that makes this so personal and so difficult is that these officers and deputies that responded to the scene, these are their friends, their neighbors. One thing that stuck out to me as I've reviewed some of the statements from the officers involved, from the victims involved, they don't refer to the victims generically. They're calling them by name. They know these people. They're their friends. They're their neighbors. They're their families. So it makes it particularly difficult in a situation like this. They knew everyone personally, from the suspect to the victims on scene. So it makes it very difficult. Yes, sir.
Susie Parker with South Arkansas Reckoning. I live in South Arkansas. There's an ongoing rumor that there's was multiple shooters. Can you confirm definitely there was only one shooter?
Yes, ma'am. There was only one shooter.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Rebecca Lett, THB11. You talked about there's not a motive quite yet, but we know that the shooter was from that community, and you did kind of mention that the victims were predominantly female. Was there any relation that he wanted to revenge, get a backup certain people with them being a close-knit community, or why we don't quite know the motive quite yet?
Right. It's unclear to us as well. I can tell you from what we've seen, there appears to be no personal connection to the shooter or any of the victims. He simply started engaging victims indiscriminately, just as targets of opportunity. It didn't appear that it was focused at any one person or focused at the entity of the Mad Butcher or anything like that. It was just a completely random, senseless act.
And forgive me, I had two questions. You also mentioned Callie Williams. Was she shot because she was helping others on the scene? Was that kind of, I wanted to clarify that right there. I think you had mentioned her earlier.
I can tell you that she was shot while rendering aid to another gunshot victim. Instead of fleeing the store, she stopped to render aid in one of the most selfless acts I've ever seen. Yes, ma'am.
Taylor Christian with Channel 7. Do we know if there was any previous medical history with mental health suspect?
No, ma'am, I'm not aware of that. That's obviously something that will be the focus of the investigation. Yes, ma'am.
Alexis Burge, Channel 4 and 16. Do you have a number of rounds that were fired or also a duration of the event?
We know from the 911 call until the radio call that the suspect was down was less than 5 minutes. As far as the number of rounds, I would just say dozens were fired.
And on that note, can you say what kind of ammunition was used?
That's going to be part of the investigation, but it appears that the majority of the rounds fired by the suspect were buckshot. Yes, ma'am.
Channel 7. Do you know if there's any update on anyone else in critical care worse off since then?
No, ma'am. Of course, you can understand, even though these are victims of a crime, HIPAA laws still apply. And so we're limited on the information that we can either receive or put out. We do know that we still have multiple victims that are in local hospitals in the Little Rock area, and we do know that at least one is listed in critical condition. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so a lot of the actions taken by law enforcement has been described as heroic. Are you able to detail at all what kind of went down or what their response was?
You know, just the fact that they literally position themselves between the shooter and helpless victims. They in aid to each other, in aid to victims on the scene. It was just an amazing response. The Fordyce Police Department and the Dallas County Sheriff's Department should be commended. Their actions were no less than heroic. When you look at the scene and the way things unfolded, it can't be overstated how heroic their actions were.
Are prosecutors seeking the death penalty?
That would kind of be outside of my lane to discuss, but my understanding is that he has been charged currently with 3 counts of capital murder, and of course those charges will be updated. But with the capital murder charge, the death penalty would be on the table. I would imagine, yes.
And then you addressed the hospitalization question, I know, but on the press release yesterday, I believe it mentioned that there were still 3 others. I think it said there's one person in critical condition at UMass, 3 others who are still hospitalized. Can you tell us, are all 3 of those being treated here in Little Rock? Are they still some folks in Dallas County or what?
My understanding is the ones that are still hospitalized are in Little Rock area hospitals.
Do you know
Yes,
when the arraignment will be?
No, ma'am, I do not. I believe that there has been some type of first appearance hearing that has taken place, but as far as the actual arraignment or any other court proceedings, I'm not sure on that. Yes, ma'am.
Was the suspect wearing any kind of body armor or protection?
No, ma'am, we don't believe he was. Yes.
Have you all been able to obtain any surveillance footage or anything to find out exactly when it started?
There is surveillance footage inside the grocery store, but not in the parking lot. But you can gather from the events and the actions of the people inside the store kind of a time frame of when the shooting began. Yes, sir.
What do you know about the suspect? Did he have any sort of formal gun training, anything like that prior to this?
No, sir, not that we're aware of at this time.
Was it protocol to actually, I guess I would say this kind of rare situation that the suspect is still alive during the mass shooting like this, was that something, a protocol or so that we wanted to take him in to custody? Or?
I'm sorry, say that one more
I
time.
guess my question is, normally sometimes when you see these situations naturally, the suspect is, I hate the lack of words, dead on the scene.
Right.
Or inflicted gun wound or so. But
Right.
we saw this one in a rare case that he was just injured, but he was taken into custody.
Yes, ma'am.
Any just protocol right there, or was that intended to just wound him and get him down and take him into custody?
Right. No, ma'am. The intent of the officers was simply to stop the threat. Once the threat was neutralized, they also rendered aid to the suspect, and of course he was immediately taken in custody, and he has been under constant law enforcement supervision since that time.
Maybe one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
We had heard that the suspect may have been banned from the Mad Butcher grocery store. Is that the case, or is that just a rumor?
I believe that's just a rumor. We've heard nothing, been able to verify nothing that he had any type of interaction or had been banned from the store. We've heard that rumor, but we've not been able to verify anything like that. Sir? I've not been notified if that's the case. Okay. Thank you.